Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel and I'm super excited to be back on Trinity Stamps YouTube channel to share two different cards, one a mini slimline card and one a traditional slimline card. They are made with two die sets from Trinity Stamps and here they are. The one on the left is the mini slimline embossed die and the one on the right is the slimline embossed circle window die. And you can see the difference in the size is really pretty crazy when you think about it, how different a mini slimline is to a traditional slimline. So I took an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock and I cut it in half vertically at 4.25 so that I could use the traditional size slimline dies to cut out some of the rectangles. Now the traditional size slimline has two rectangles and then the windows, the circular windows that you can cut out, whereas the mini slimline has three rectangles to mat and you can cut out the circles of one of those as well. I'm also going to be using the First Bloom stamp set and I'm going to stamp a bunch of the images on my original Misty, and I've got half a piece of an 8.5 by 11 piece of white cardstock cut horizontally this time so that I can fit all of these images, and I'm stamping them with a Copic friendly ink because I'm going to do some Copic coloring. And the great thing about this stamp set is you could definitely create a bouquet on an A2 card or even a 5 by 7 card, but you can also use these images on their own individually, and I like that there are different sizes of the images, so I'm going to use the larger sizes on the traditional slimline and the smaller on the mini slimline. I am heat setting this ink because I really don't want any smearing with my Copic markers. I'm going to start with YG05 and YG09 to color all of the leaves. So I'm only going to do a 2-color blend. I really want to get this coloring done quickly and easily. So I have the lightest color, I color the whole leaf, and then the darker color, I just put some at the base of the leaf and then go back to the lightest color to blend that color out. And this is just a really quick and easy way to do some shading and blending. On some of those smaller leaves, I might go in with slightly darker color just to differentiate between the two. And once all of the coloring of the leaves is done, I am ready to move on to the flowers. For the larger flowers, I know that I'm going to be using them on those teal colors of cardstock, so I'm sticking with blues and teals for them as well. For these larger petals, I do like to leave a little spot of white when I'm originally filling in the lightest color. That will leave me, when I go back over it later after adding the darker color, a really whiter spot or lighter spot for some shading and blending. It's just an easy way for me to make sure that I don't go too heavy-handed on the tips of the petals and that I leave some room for some lighter color and darker color. I'm going to add the darker color right on the lines of the stamp. The artist, the illustrator, makes it really easy to see where to get your darkest color when they have lines like that on the petal. And then just go over those with that lightest color one more time and fill in those white spots, and that will create that look of a gradient of color. I'm going to do the same exact thing with the pinks. Just going to I basically draw little circles at the tips of the petals and then only fill in around the circle with the lightest color. Again, that just leaves a highlight mark. For me, it is easier to do it that way than to just be very light-handed at the end of the petal. Some people have much more control than I do. I'm very heavy-handed with my coloring, so if I leave that like white spot and then go back over it later, you can see that it leaves a little highlight mark. And if you really wanted to make it accentuated, you could use a white gel pen on top of that to add little bits of highlight or little dots. For me, I really just wanted to get these colored so that we could add them to the slimline cards that we're working on. Once all my coloring is done, I'm just going to hold the dies in place on top of my images with some purple tape and run them through my die cut machine. Now it's time to put everything together. I'm going to use tape runner to adhere the rectangles down to each other. I love using different colors of cardstock so that you have this really colorful background here. It's easy to see which side is the front with the embossed circles because they have that really nice embossed detail to them on the front. So I'm just going to layer those 3 layers on top of each other. And then I decided to stamp a sentiment from the A Sentiment for Almost Everything stamp set. I love this stamp set because it really does have a ton of little sentiments, and they're all in that nice clean typeface that you can use pretty much on any card. So I'm just going to stamp on Versamark ink in the middle of the center circle and then cover it with white embossing powder and then just heat set that, and it just says just because. And I just love, like I said, that clean little typeface that can be used pretty much anywhere on your card. I'm going to pop up some of the flowers and the butterfly, and I'll have this little flower flat to the card. This way there's some dimension and interest. The butterfly looks like he's landing on the top there, and that is really a nice little design for a mini slimline. So that's what these windows are perfect for, is helping you create a really easy design, because the decisions are made for you with those 3 windows right in the center. I just added some Nuvo crystal glaze as some dots. So now let's turn to the traditional slimline, where you have a ton more real estate. Like I mentioned, there's only 2 rectangles here, so you cut the windows out of the slightly smaller rectangle, and then you can mat it on top of the larger rectangle. Here I was able to use the really large bundle of flowers and leaves in the center, and then I popped up some smaller leaves and stems on the other 2 circles as well. I didn't think that a sentiment alone would look great on these windows because they are so much bigger. The other thing you could do with these windows is create 3 individual shakers. If you close off the areas in between, they could have 3 different colors of shaker goodies inside. I did forget to fill in the little flower center, so I went back and did that real fast with a darker color of teal. And this time I'm going to stamp one of the sentiments from that same A Sentiment for Almost Everything stamp set on a white piece of cardstock, and I'm going to trim it down into a sentiment strip and then cut a thin piece of fun foam with some nonstick scissors. I know it doesn't look like it's nonstick, right? Because they kind of just stuck there, but you definitely use some nonstick scissors when you're cutting that fun foam, and then just add that strip behind the sentiment strip and then just pop that up right on the card. Really clean and simple, very easy Copic coloring, and then some die cutting, and then just adding some of that Nuvo crystal glaze for some shine and little detail accents around the card. And that is pretty much it for the traditional slimline. So let's make the bases now. For the mini slimline card, I like to cut a 6x6 piece of white cardstock and then put it in my score pal and score it at 3 inches. So I think of a mini slimline as 6 by 3 inches, and you'll see when I mat the panel on top that I do get a little white border around the outside, but I really liked the way it ended up looking, so I was okay with that. So I'm just going to add some tape runner to the card base that we've created. And then when I lay that card panel on top, like I said, there is that little white line around the outside. I thought it looked really good because of the white heat embossing in the center, so I left it at that size. For the traditional slimline card, my favorite way to make a base is to put an 8.5 by 11 piece of white cardstock in the score pal and figure out how big the panel is. Mine was about 3.5, so I'm going to draw my score line at 3.5 and then reinforce that fold. Then I'm going to place the folded edge into my trimmer and cut off the excess after the end of that panel, of that card base there. And that's just a really easy way without having to like really bring out a ruler. You're just using the score pal to measure how big your panel is. So now I'm just going to adhere that panel down with some tape runner down to the card base. And these were just 2 really quick and easy cards to showcase the difference between these 2 dies, the size of the mini slimline with the embossed circles and the size of a traditional slimline with the embossed circles. If you are interested in any of the Trinity stamp supplies that I used today, they will all be linked down below. I want to thank you so much for stopping by. Have a wonderful day.